A new tropical cyclone is possible in the Gulf of Mexico in the next 36 hours. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for August 20th. So we've got our 4L, a potential tropical cyclone in the Atlantic, along with 4B, which is weakening inland over India. Don't get confused between the two. L is of course the designation for the Atlantic, and also the remnants of Yvette are still traceable in the Eastern Pacific. With 4L at a high chance of developing into a tropical cyclone, tropical storm warnings have been issued for parts of the coast of Mexico into southern Texas. Also, another small chance of development near the Cape Verde Islands in the next week. But regarding 4L, it's likely to make landfall in the next 36 hours and could produce significant rainfall. Yvette is over there in the Eastern Pacific. There's nothing else around it that's likely to form in the next 5 days, so the Eastern Pacific appears to have entered a little bit of a lull at last. And in the Western Pacific, we've still got two areas of interest that we're monitoring, a 30% in the Philippine Sea and a 20% much further to the northeast, which will be a rather fleeting system. The one near the Philippines is probably the one to watch. And in the Indian Ocean, 4B moving inland and still looking pretty decent. I imagine it's going to be delivering a lot of rainfall over the Odisha and West Bengal regions of India and could become a significant flash flooding issue if it hasn't already. Let's check the satellite imagery then across the basins. Here's the Atlantic showing quite clearly. You can see 4L there looking pretty decent. If it was low resolution, you could say it might fool you into being a tropical storm already. Further east, one or two little features down in the intertropical convergence zone, but nothing major. Eastern Pacific, if you look carefully, you might still see the remnants of Yvette, but apart from that, it's a pretty quiet picture. A few tropical blow-ups in the usual areas, but nothing that's likely to get any organization under it, so nothing doing there. Here is a close-up of 4L right now. It is potential tropical cyclone 4. It hasn't got a name, it's not officially a tropical cyclone yet, and here it is on the satellite imagery. Recon was in there earlier today and got not a center of circulation. It was lacking very much in the southwestern side, and it's likely to help itself a little bit in that regard. Whether it will manage to become a tropical cyclone or not in the time allotted remains to be seen, but chances are more towards it happening rather than not. Decent look on satellite as well, it has to be said. Western Pacific, again, you can see that disturbance near the Philippines is looking pretty decent really when you look at that. Further towards the northeast, that other area is not looking so good. And also rotation towards Hainan Island as well, the South China Sea. There could be a sneaky little chance of a disturbance doing something over there towards the Gulf of Tonkin. Certainly enhanced rainfall once again for that area. Here's the Indian Ocean, how that looks right now, and you can see there that the tropical cyclone that made landfall yesterday is now moving inland. Still rather deep in pressure and looking obviously pretty decent on satellite. Lots of moisture and rain potential in there. Southern hemisphere, the Australian region looking fairly quiet. Flash of thunderstorms there over the Solomon Islands, but generally a pretty calm scene. Sea surface temperatures in the Eastern Pacific are still climbing a little bit, particularly along the coast of southern Mexico, with 30 degrees Celsius waters extending outwards over the water there. Gulf of Mexico, 30 degrees plus as well, where the PTC is. Off Cuba is the hottest point of the Atlantic though, pushing 32 degrees. And the Western Atlantic also looking very good, with temperatures over 28 degrees for an extremely large area. Look to the Eastern Hemisphere, here's the Indian Ocean, not much upwelling caused by the storm, although a little, particularly to the south of where it tracked actually. but still pulling 28 degrees Celsius waters quite easily. South China Sea very warm, warmer still in the Gulf of Tonkin, and in the Philippine Sea obviously very warm SSTs there, and extending very far to the north and far to the east. I mean, look at the 26-degree isotherm extending so far out over the ocean there in pretty much all directions and over almost half of Japan and up the east coast of China. Here's the anomalies. The tropics are less above average than the higher latitudes, it has to be said, so we're always on the lookout for some higher latitude action this year, it would appear, particularly in the Western Pacific, so keep watching that very closely. La Nina effect is still very much there. The oceanic heat content for the Atlantic is piping hot. When you look at where the PTC is right now, it's tracking over some slightly higher values, so that will just help it a little bit more, certainly with those convection and convective tops. The Western Pacific looking very decent once again, and the Eastern Pacific claiming a little bit back as well. But now let's take a look at what the models have in store. The global models still have absolutely nothing for 4L, so we're not looking at that. We're looking at what's going on in the Eastern Atlantic. This is the GFS taking on a tropical disturbance that moves through Cape Verde and then out over the main development region. We'll keep watching that one in the next frames as well, because this one lasts pretty much the whole model period actually. But weak start there across the main development region of the Atlantic. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see these images either, which is software issues, which is extremely annoying. But now I believe you're looking at the Western Pacific, which shows 2 or maybe 3 systems that never really get particularly strong. It's quite a mess over there in the Western Pacific anyway at this time of year usually, so it's no different this year, but you could get 1 or 2 spin-up storms that come out of this, but particularly the Philippines. The CMC model is suggesting that it could become a tropical cyclone and develop quite a bit near Taiwan. Here's the precipitation values for the area around the Gulf of Mexico, so those values will start to rise a little bit. Once again, this is the GFS model, which isn't even seeing this system right now, so it's highly likely that all of this data is going to be binned. But let's just take a look at some of those highest values. Around about 4 inches or 5 inches for some areas of Mexico inland, more than on the coast, but really that is nowhere near what it's going to end up being along the coast. Look at that, barely even 1 inch on this GFS model. That's poppycock, and wherever it makes landfall there will be high amounts of rain. Longer range, day 5 to 10, let's take a look at the Atlantic once again. And once again I can't see this, but I believe this shows the disturbance in the main development region continuing westwards. I think it still has a shot of becoming a tropical cyclone along this period, but I can't remember what the model was showing. But it tracks north of the Greater Antilles and Lesser Antilles and heads right into the Western Atlantic there, and still has a chance of developing later on. Looking to the Western Pacific, and here's another look at what happens in the longer range period. If I remember rightly, because once again I can't see it, I think there's 2 more little disturbances that try to form here, and 1 or 2 shoved off towards the east as well. So a rather uncertain pattern for the Western Pacific, certainly at this point, in the 5 to 10 day range, and even more so beyond that. Certainly a quiet season there so far though in general. Anyway, that's the important stuff done with. You can scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store for all merch needs, and you can also request animations there as well, individual and full season. We also still have the Still Waiting for Hone shirt, of course we do. In the silly range, we take a look once again at the Atlantic, and a significant hurricane ends up developing out of that main development region area of interest. So that would certainly be an interesting feature, certainly not out of the realms of possibility, certainly for the time of year. When we get into the early part of September, these types of scenarios are very possible indeed. Hurricane just really skirting the whole eastern seaboard of the United States there. I think there was something else further east too, and in the western Pacific in the long range, we also have a typhoon there as well, a substantial typhoon by the looks of things, that gets somewhat close to the coast of Japan, if I remember rightly, and then moves off the coast once again. In fact, there it is. I get to see it for once now. There it is, developing late on in the run, 1st of September, and starts to scoot northwards, but we've seen so many scenarios like this on the GFS model, it's hard to believe that's true. That's actually headed for Tokyo there. August 20th, 1886, a hell of a long time ago. Take a look at what was going on in the Atlantic. The Indianola hurricane, though, was the big talking point, decimated that town. It's been a ghost town ever since. That was from 5L, a category 4 that made landfall there in Texas. There was also a category 2 striking Jamaica, and a category 1 out at sea that was going to become a major in the next 24 hours. What a day that would have been in the Atlantic. In the western Pacific, we had a tropical storm near the Japanese islands and a tropical depression that had moved inland over India that was once a tropical storm as well. So back in today, the Atlantic Ocean, the next name on the list, might be getting scratched off shortly. It's Danielle. In the eastern Pacific, Javier is next up, and in the central Pacific, we're still waiting for Hone. In the western Pacific, Ma-on is up next, and in the North Indian Ocean, we are still waiting now for Sitrang, now that 4B never got an actual name from the Indian Meteorological Department. In the southern hemisphere, when we start again, the Australian region will have Darian next up on its list. In the southwest Indian Ocean, we start with Ashley, and in the South Pacific, the next name is Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again with another one tomorrow night.